we are. The thing that I wanted to get into today was how I do my podcast. So, y'all know I have a podcast. I'm actually in season 2 of my podcast. Shout out to me. I started it actually in 2020 for personal reasons. I've always wanted to podcast, and I started a podcast years ago with a friend, and we dissolved it. It was his podcast. He wasn't as available because he had other things going on in his plate. However, it's always been a passion of mine, so I started my own podcast. Like, wait for who? So, as far as my podcast is concerned, the name of my podcast is MUMU. MUMU stands for Mutable and Multifaceted, which I am. I'm a Gemini girl, so it's two sides to every story. It's all sides. I'm such an open-minded person. I'm so mutable and multifaceted that I wanted to kind of represent those that we get left behind, that kind of get pushed under the rug. If you don't fit into like the box of society, a lot of times you're overlooked, you're downplayed, people think you're weird, things of that nature. So a lot of things that I feel and I say with my friends, I wanted that to be public because representation matters. You know what I'm saying? So I'm here for all the girls and the worlds and the days and the thems and the us's and the we's that don't get the recognition, the programming that we deserve and that we need. When you see people doing things that you like, it helps you know that shit's okay. I was growing up and I didn't have strong, dark-skinned, beautiful, popping ass women in my life. I didn't have women that freely give compliments. I didn't have women that handle their business and are about financial success and, self-improvement. So I thought that was a far-fetched notion. It wasn't until I moved to California and met different people and started actually rubbing elbows with millionaires and people that was just on their shit that I didn't have to question if it was real. And when I met my first Black millionaire, it really opened up my mind because she was a woman. And I was like, okay, sis, I see you. Now it's 2021. We do have representation as far as women in creative fields and women that choose to not have children. And that's okay too. All of those things. So I talk about a lot of those things, my personal life, building a business, building a brand, laughter, love, lessons, all of that on my podcast. So I use the Anchor platform to create my podcast. That's anchor.fm. So Anchor is really simple. I love it, honestly. There's only two things that I will say about Anchor, but I'll get into that in a second. So literally, it's so easy to sign up. You literally go through anchor.fm. I don't know why they chose that as a website, but that's it. And you can easily record your podcast from your phone. You do not have to have minimal listenership or any type of excessive things to get started. It's free. It's easy to use. It's a basic platform. So I will say this about Anchor. I would take time to get to know the platform because with any interface, you do need to know how to use the tools that they are giving you. And a big thing for me was learning how to edit. Now, you can start talking immediately. You make your account on Anchor, get going. It's super simple to start a podcast. They provide you with the distribution. It's the thing that I absolutely love about it. A lot of times, it's not the art that you make, it's how you distribute it that becomes your issue. How do I get people to see it? How do I get people to hear it? How do I get it out to the public, to the masses? And Anchor does all of that for you. They put your podcast on every major streaming platform. The only platform that I know for sure that they don't use is SoundCloud. However, Anchor provides you with what's called your RSS feed, which is a collection of everything that you've done on your account of your podcast, and which allows you to share it. So you can share it to Apple, but they distribute to Apple. You can share it to SoundCloud. You can download it for yourself, for your own personal record. That's another thing that's really big to me from Anchor, is the fact that you own your shit. Ownership is most important. I learned that from Master P. It doesn't matter what you make if you don't own it. There's no point in, like, if you watch the versus battles, I love the versus battles. Shout out to Timbaland and Swizz Beatz for putting that together, because that is Black excellence. But if you watch the versus battles, some of these artists can't play their song longer than 30 seconds because they don't own the song. There's no way you're going to have my voice, my talent, my skill, and I don't get paid and I can't use it as freely as I want. I don't like that. So the thing with Anchor is you own your shit. They don't own it. They literally are just distributing it for you. They also offer you sponsorships. So unlike YouTube, where you have to go out and find your own sponsors, where you have to make your own content to raise enough eyebrows to even be addressed with sponsors, Anchor provides that for you. So when you're making your podcast, you can add sponsored segments. Now, the way a sponsored segment works is through RPM. And I think it stands for something per I'll put it down here what it stands for, okay? But basically, the more times people listen to it is how you get paid. So if I do a 30-minute podcast and I put in one segment of a sponsored ad, I record the ads. Anchor helps you set it up very easily to record the ad. It tells you what to say. It tells you how to do it, how to speak so that, you feel comfortable, all of that. And then what they do is they tell you the time length, they tell you how, everything. They literally give you a blueprint of how to do it. And I love that. Break it down for me, boo. You can be more successful when you know how to be successful, and that's what that provides. So once you record your sponsored segments, you can put as many in every episode as you like. I do one per 30 minutes. People's attention spans are a little bit shorter nowadays with TikTok and Twitter and Instagram. So not everyone is going to listen to longer than 30 minutes of anything. You get me? So I do have a variety of my episodes of my podcast. Some are hour long, some are 30 minutes, some are 15 minutes, some are 10 minutes. It just depends upon whatever content that I'm presenting that day, or whatever the message is, because I like to share information. If I'm not being helpful, I'd rather just keep it to myself. If I'm not sharing something of value, I wouldn't put it in there. However, my promotional sponsorships are making me money while I sleep. Here's the kick. I know for a fact through trial and error that placement of your sponsored segments are what's key. Because remember, they are based upon how many times people listen to it. So you recorded your first podcast episode, you edited it, you're feeling great, you're putting it out. Anchor has distributed it out for you to Spotify, to Apple Podcasts, to, I think it's called Breaker, all of these amazing platforms that it sends it out to. I might put on the screen like all of the places that they promote in your podcast. My favorite is Spotify. I'm a Spotify girl. Spotify owns Anchor, by the way, just in case you guys didn't know. So it is a subsect of Spotify, so it's pretty legit. Now, they've distributed it for you, and you put your sponsored ad at the end of your podcast. What if nobody makes it to the end of your podcast? What if people stop listening halfway through? Anchor has a solution for you. So one of the great things about Anchor are the analytics. I love how they break down who's listening to your podcast, what country, what state they are in, their age demographic, how long they listen, what is about the drop-off point per podcast for your listenership. So if you have a podcast episode that gets boring, I guess, in the middle, or it doesn't hold people's attention in the middle, you're not going to benefit at all from a sponsorship at the end, because no one's going to hear it, because no one's making it to the end. So if you put your sponsorships in the beginning, it kind of sets the stage for listenership. You know, people are going to listen to it. As soon as they cut the podcast on that episode, they're going to hear your sponsored segment, as opposed to, oh, people are listening to my podcast, but I'm not getting paid. Why is my revenue not going up, but I have listenership? And it's because people aren't listening to your ads. Now, like I said, some of my episodes are about an hour, a little over that. So I do one sponsor segment per 30 minutes. If you have multiple sponsorships, you can do as many sponsored segments as you like. My biggest thing that I'm working on for 2021 is adding my own sponsorship. So I want my own sponsor that I can create my own ad for that is not through Anchor. Here's another thing. Anchor will provide you with different types of sponsored ads as well. So say the ad that you already have running, you love it, it works, you like it. They'll also offer you through qualifications. So if you're getting a certain amount of listeners each month, they're going to start offering you different types of ads. They're going to start offering you different types of revenue-based ads. Now, different ads have different RPM. So the most basic RPM is like $15, I think it is. If you have multiple ads, you have multiple chances of making more money. Does that make sense? So they're going to give you a basic package. And then as you continue to grow and develop, they're going to give you more opportunities for different types of ads. Personally, I highly recommend using your resources. So Anchor provides you with everything. They provide you with the platform to record. They provide you with the editing software. They provide you with distribution. They provide you with the sponsored ads to record to get you going. And they provide you with the ownership of your catalog. The least you could do is bring your own everything else. So for me, what I brung, my own graphics. I created my own cover art and graphics through Canva. I love Canva. You can go to Fiverr.com as well if you don't want to do it yourself. Fiverr.com. Fiverr's pretty cool. You can find anybody and everybody that can do anything. And the thing about Fiverr is you can play around with your pricing. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get something done. If you have a friend that does graphic design, ask that friend to make you some cover art. You literally take a picture like you would for the gram and just spruce it up. Add a filter, add your name of your podcast to it, add some photo editing that would kind of amplify your picture. I'm going to add my picture in of my latest cover art right now. And it really gets you going. It helps set you apart. In the beginning, I did not have this. My first 10 episodes, I was just using one of my favorite pictures of myself as my cover art. This helped generate a lot of my close friends as my podcast listeners. When people recognize you, they will associate whatever you do with you. So when I was just using my regular picture of my regular face, people were listening to it because they saw me. And they were like, oh, let me check out what she's doing. As opposed to now that I have established a listenership base and that I have established creative control over my shit, people are looking for new. They're looking for better. So I had to amplify my cover art. So I couldn't just use a plain picture of myself. Now I have actual cover art for my podcast. Same thing that I'm doing with my YouTube, revamping it, adding my spruced up way. At some point you do have to level up. So for my second season, I wanted to level up. The thing also about Anchor that I will say is once you got your editing together, you're good. There's nothing else complex about it. So what I highly recommend doing is if you want to start a podcast, go on anchor.fm and record yourself speaking. Get used to hearing your voice. Let me tell you, the first 10 to 15 episodes, everything I wanted to edit. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be so smooth, so seamless, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. So if you want to do something, stop making excuses, stop holding yourself back, and just do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Part of my podcasting is the imperfections. You can hear me smack sometimes because I get riled up and I'm excited when I'm telling a story, and I'll be like, girl, and because I'm speaking to my friends, I'm speaking to those that really support me and that listen to me. So of course I want to be myself, and that's another thing that a lot of people don't do. If you know that you don't speak a certain way, if you know that you don't carry yourself a certain way, do not fake it with your podcast. People can't see you, so it's a very one-dimensional way of sharing and communicating. So think about if when you're on the phone with a person, you can't see their gestures, you can't really, see their facial expressions and movements. So you have to be able to convey that through your voice. So if you're not being yourself, it will easily come off as boring, stiff, and just some news type of shit. Like, nobody wants to hear that. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying fake it, but I am saying that there's more to you than trying to be like somebody else. So don't do what you heard somebody else do unless it is going to work. Like, don't get me wrong. Imitation is a form of flattery. However, if that's not you, don't do it, because you will not be able to maintain it. Trust me. Also with Anchor, that I will say, the thing about having your own cover art is you need to also look at other podcasts. So if you have never made a podcast, if you don't know anybody else that's podcasting, and you are just starting out on Anchor, all you need is your phone or your laptop. You don't need a microphone. You don't need lighting. You don't need, soundproofing, nothing of that matter. All you need is you and your phone. So if I'm recording on my phone and I know that I don't know any other information about podcasting, I'm going to research podcasting. Research the thing that you're interested in so you can know what you are doing, period. So what I did was I said, I'm a Spotify girl. I went on Spotify and I went to the podcast section and I looked at the cover art of the podcast. I looked at the descriptions of the podcast. I looked at the names of episodes that have very high views and listenership. I looked up the top podcasts and I looked at the topics that they were speaking about and, different segments that they had included in their podcast. And I really got inspired. My first season, I did segments, but I know that segments can get very repetitive, and I know that they can get very monotone if you aren't always in the mood to add a segment. Not to mention, that takes more research. So if you're not in the business of doing research and dedicated time spent on your podcast, you might not want to add in as many complexities such as segments and different things of that nature. Personally, I add segments when I feel the topic that I'm speaking about calls for a break, or it calls for reiteration in some other form, such as a segment. I do a segment where I spotlight different Black movies and shows and music and things of that nature. I don't need that for every episode. You get what I'm saying? Like, then it becomes very pop culture, and that's not me. So I'm not going to do that every freaking episode, but I am going to do it when the episode calls for it. So I love the fact that you can change things up with your podcast. That's the greatest thing. It's literally TV for your ears. So if you want to add in commercials, add in commercials. If you want to add in, friends, you can do that as well. So some of the other features of Anchor are you can do friend or peer-to-peer recording. So say I'm here on the East Coast and I want to record with a friend on the West Coast. If they also have the Anchor app, we can record a podcast episode together. Anchor does that for you. It literally records both of our segments and we can edit them together, or we can both have access to them. It's really cool. I've done that with a friend of mine who also has a podcast, who also does it through Anchor. So I love that feature. Also, with Anchor, you can download other sounds. So say you record something, say a song, or say you record someone speaking at a event or something, and you want to add that to your podcast. It easily lets you download and add that segment in. It's not hard at all. It's a very simple to use interface. Also, what Anchor lets you do, speaking back to the sponsorships can come also from your listenership. Anchor provides a link where your listeners can provide you with monetary donations. Love that for us, boo. I love that for us. Give me money. Send me money. Yes, honey. So you can add that into your podcast yourself verbally, which I highly recommend. You have to engage your listeners. Have them do something. Tell them to email you. Tell them to send you money. Tell them to share your podcast. You have to give what's called a call to action so that your listeners are not just listening. They need to participate as well. It's just like if you were the teacher at school, you're not going to get up there and talk at the class all day and lecture. You're going to engage somebody, ask somebody a question, have them raise their hand so they can give you a response. Now, that gets kind of tedious if you want to do it every episode. I would record it as a segment and just add it in so you yourself don't have to speak about it every single episode. You just add in that little section and you can go. Sponsorships are very easy to speak to people about because it's support. You're like, if you're enjoying this podcast and you like what you're hearing, share this with a friend. Feel free to send me a donation. You can click the link in the bio to help me continue to promote and, create this podcast. As well, Spotify is constantly adding new features of integration with Anchor. So one of the newest features that they've added as of 2020, last year, they added the option to add music. Now, there's a catch. Music is so touch and go with anything, any type of distribution. You can't play music on YouTube. You can't have someone's song in your commercial, anything like that. Same thing goes with podcasting. So you have to have the right or the permission of the artist to use their song in your podcast, unless you are using Anchor. On Anchor, they do have an integration where you can put songs that are on Spotify in your podcast. Now, pay attention. You can only use Spotify. It does not sync up with Apple. It does not sync up with Breaker or Beaker or whatever the name of it is. It only works with Spotify. So if your listeners are not using Spotify to listen to your podcast, they will not hear that segment. They will not hear that song. So using that information, act accordingly. I have not used the feature yet. I don't use registered music, period. I use the music that I purchase and have the permission to use for my podcast. So it also helps distinguish me with individuality, as well as I don't have to worry about that shit, period. So it does help, but I want to play around with it just to see what's up, because majority of my listeners are on Spotify. They're listening to my podcast via Spotify or via Apple Podcasts. I have both platforms, so for me it's not a big deal. But if you know that most of your listeners are listening on, say, one of the other distribution sites, you wouldn't want to use the Spotify integration for music. Does that make sense? As well as other sites, like your listeners won't hear it. It's kind of a waste of your time, if you will. Now, I will say this. While using the Anchor app to create your podcast, you need to be one of your listeners. Do not put something out that you yourself do not watch or that you yourself do not listen to. Here's why. I learned this lesson the hard way, and it only took me one time, and now I've got the lesson. Okay, thank you, God. Now I got the lesson. It was one day I was rushing to put out my podcast. I do weekly on Mondays, and I call it MUMU Monday because the name of my podcast is MUMU. So I do MUMU Mondays, and I was rushing to put out my podcast. I was a little last minute. I did some last minute editing. I put the podcast out, and I realized after like a week that I had forgotten a segment. The segment that I put in was the unedited version, and I wanted the edited version, and I had made a mistake. It wasn't a big mistake. It wasn't bad, but as a personal courtesy to self, I'm a creative and I'm sensitive about my shit. I was upset with myself that I didn't catch that. If I would have listened to my podcast in its entirety before publishing it, I would not have had that issue. Lesson learned. Now I put out my podcast. I listen to it in its entirety before I click publish. And then after I publish it, I listen to it again on one of the streaming sites that I use. Like I said, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just to make sure that what I'm listening to, what I thought I was giving, is actually being served. Okay? No mistakes over here, boo-boo. No, you will make mistakes, don't get me wrong, but no basic ass mistakes. Nothing that can be easily prevented or easily remedied. I don't need to do that. That's very amateur for me in my second season, and my first season is 20 episodes. My seasons are 20 episodes. So that's very amateur for me to be making those types of basic mistakes. But in the beginning, you might make those mistakes. So that's why I'm telling you, listen to your shit before you push publish. Period. One of my favorite features of Anchor, besides the fact that they distribute it for you and the fact that you can acquire sponsorships fairly easily, is they tell you how much money you're making. You go right on your side, right on your account, and it tells you how much you've made from your sponsored segments, how many listeners you have, where they're from, what they're doing, what your favorite and top episodes are. It tells you everything that you need to know. Also, what it will tell you is where your fall offs are. So all the good information that it's giving you, it's also giving you information to know what you could do better. So if you know that some of your episodes are not being listened to as much as others, figure out why. For me, the longer my episodes, the higher my viewership. Some people, the shorter their episodes, the higher their viewership. You have to learn your audience. So I highly recommend studying the analytics that Anchor provides as well, so you can know who you're speaking to and what they like. Also, ask for constructive criticism. Girl, I send my podcast to my friends, and anybody that I'm speaking about in my podcast, I send it to them directly, and I ask them, tell me what you think. What do you like about this? What didn't you like? Where was my flow a little slow? Or what was it too fast? For me personally, the thing that people love about me is my voice. So with that, I tend to speak slower on my podcast. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, if I'm telling a story, I get excited. I get to going, girl. We might be landing some planes around here. However, I'm still going to try to keep my cadence slower because that's what my audience prefers. Girl, I didn't know that in the beginning. So some of my first few episodes are just like, I wasn't all over the place, but I kind of was all over the place compared to how I set up my shows and my episodes now. Also, number one thing that I highly recommend is have fun with it. In the beginning, try out different styles, try out different things, whatever you like. Keep your energy variable. You have to be able to be pivotal. You have to be able to pivot in the beginning because, like I said, you don't know who your audience is. You don't know what they like just yet. You don't know where to place your sponsorships just yet. It might benefit you to do different things your first few episodes. The first episode that you do, don't publish it yet. Play around with the editing software. Learn how it works. Look at tutorials on YouTube. How do I edit in Anchor? Type it in. Everything is 2021. Everything you need is on the internet. There is no excuse in this country of USA and in this time to not know something purposefully. People ask me, do you know how to blow it up? No, but I can look it up. It's nothing that a YouTube video can't teach me. It's nothing that I can't find on the interweb. We have the luxury of the blessing and the curse of knowledge here in America. We can know anything and everything, and at the same time know absolutely nothing. Okay, so I highly recommend you looking up these things so that you are not failing forward purposefully. You're gonna fail a little bit. Some areas you're gonna be like, dang, I can't believe I didn't know that. I can't believe I didn't get that information. But then there's gonna be times where you're like, that was so easy to figure out. It wasn't even that big a deal. So what I did for my first episode, I didn't publish it. I just recorded a couple clips. I think they were like 15 to 20 minutes each. And I learned how to edit them together in the Anchor app. I took my time. I gave myself literally like 2 weeks and I played around with it. And I just learned the interface. What does this mean? Where does this go? How does this work? I learned the time frame of when I click publish of my podcast before I see it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It comes on Apple before it comes on Spotify. However, Spotify sends me a notification. Hey, you got a new episode of the podcast that you follow. That's another thing. Back to being your own listener. You have to listen to your podcast. If you don't even listen to it, why would other people? Really think about that. I know I've seen, because I work in film and television, so I understand there's some people that they can't watch themselves on TV. They record a video or they record a song or something. They can't listen to themselves. Don't be that. Do you, literally, figuratively and literally. If you make a podcast, you have to be your own listener. You have to enjoy your own podcast. Do you get what I'm saying? If you can't even enjoy it while you're listening to it, other people won't either. So I follow my podcast on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts because I want to get notified when I upload a new video. When I upload a new podcast. I want to get notified when I've updated, something about my podcast. So you have to be able to look at your podcast from the view of the creator and the view of the consumer so that you can better yourself and better your product. Anchor also gives you music as well. So like I was saying about the Spotify integration, say you don't want to use the music in your podcast. You have lots, and I'm talking about Anchor gives you so many. They give you interludes, so shorter songs that are like probably less than a minute that you can insert into your podcast to fill a space gap before you change segments or something of that nature. They also give you sound effects. So say you want to have the effect of like clapping hands in your podcast. They have that in there as well. Anchor really gives you all the tools to create a pretty great podcast. You just have to explore it and use the tools that they provide you. Also, something that I've never used on Anchor besides the Spotify integration of music, they have a thing where people can send you a voice message. So say someone's listening to your podcast on Spotify and they absolutely love it and they want to tell you, but you don't have an email or something of that nature. They can send you a voice message. I have personally never received a voice message, personally never sent one either. However, they do have that option. And it does help with engagement as far as your audience. I could see the benefit of it. I just personally have not used it. Also, the thing that I really enjoy about Anchor is the ability to pre-publish your episodes. I highly recommend pre-publishing your episodes. So I record my episodes in advance. I am not a person to sit down and, just record. I have to plan things out. So if I have a topic that I want to speak about and plan it out, I may not feel like speaking at the time about that topic. So what I do is I just pick up my phone, go to my Anchor app, start recording, get all of the things that are on my mind out, And then from there, I can just go ahead and edit the podcast, and I can set it to publish at a later date. So, like I said, I have new episodes of my podcast MUMU every Monday, right? So what I do is I edit throughout the week. So say I'm done with editing by Wednesday. I can set my podcast to go live Monday at 6 a.m. on Wednesday. Girl, amazing. That means that you don't have to micromanage yourself or your podcast. You literally can set it up in advance. So right now I already have 2 podcasts in my queue, one for this Monday coming up and the one for the next Monday. It makes creation really simple and really easy. Also, one of the features that I've been playing with for Anchor that I love, now that I'm in my 2nd season, I can play around with it more because I know more of the interface. I know more how it works. I have the fan base. I have the listenership. I can do what I want, right? So for me, I love the aspect of importing and exporting. So like I said, I use music that I myself have created for my show. I do audio production. I have friends that do audio production and music production. So they send me the songs and things that they would like for me to use, or the things that I would like for them to send me. I commission out, right? Which literally means I'll tell my friend the style of music that I want. He will create the song. He will send it to me. I put it in my podcast. So I have it downloaded on my phone. I click import and it literally adds it to my library on Anchor. Boom, baby. Boom, baby. Now I can use that as whatever I want. Anchor gives you the option to add background music to your segments. It gives you the option to add music. All of the features there to create a bomb-ass podcast. I first got started with podcasting. I thought I needed a microphone. I thought I needed a soundproof room. I thought I needed, all of these things to get started, and you don't. Anchor really sets it up so that all you need is their app. Everything you need to get started is on the app, and then some, so that you can even play around with it to develop your podcast the way you want it, which is pretty dope. Pretty dope. Like, kudos to you, Spotify, because y'all did that. Now, don't get me wrong, Anchor is its own separate entity of Spotify, but it is a subsect of Spotify. And if you have any issues, they are on it. They are helpful. They have great help desk. I have contacted the help desk once before because I needed help integrating my RSS feed. Once I actually got Apple Podcasts, they give you the option to claim your podcast. So on Apple, you can go on Apple Podcasts and say, hey, that's me. That's my shit. And you can claim it. So I did have a little issue trying to figure out in the beginning, like, how do I get my RSS feed to Apple? And they easily, quickly, promptly helped me and set me up. Like, it wasn't hard at all. And I think that's the benefit of Anchor. They make it so easy and so simple so that you don't have kind of any excuse to not do it, which is what I love, So like I said, I'm in my 2nd season. You can do as many episodes as you like. You can set up your podcast any way that you like. You can do it kind of any style. And I highly recommend just playing around with it in the beginning to see what your real style is, like how you flow. Do you speak better, planned out set time to do your podcast? Or do you just catch a vibe and you're like, okay, now I want to do this and speak about it, and you just pick up your phone and go, like I do, So sometimes I plan out, okay, I'm going to record a podcast today. But most times, whenever something comes to my mind and I catch a flow, I'm ready to speak about it, I'm ready to go, I just pick up my phone, go to my Anchor app, and boom, start recording. And you can save things by date. So it's pretty organized. If you want to, like I said, pre-plan your podcast like I do, you can set it by date. So I have like one segment that I recorded to go live on one Monday, the next to go live on another Monday. And I can just continuously add to them until I have a completed episode or all the segments that I would like to add to that particular episode. It's really simple. So as far as I'm concerned, I love it. I absolutely love Anchor. I do want to work with them as far as like a sponsorship, because I don't really feel that they have that type of promotion yet. I don't feel like they have that type of ambassador program just yet. But when you ready, holla at your girl, because I know your interface inside and out, and I know how to bring people to it, and I know how to use it effectively. So for me, I highly recommend the Anchor app. If you would like to check it out, it is free. It is nothing that you have to stress yourself out over. However, I do recommend, I'm strongly suggesting, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm strongly suggesting that you play around with the interface. You check out the features that they do offer, and you see what works for you, and what you are not interested in, leave it alone. Leave it alone. So, for me, I love the aspect of integrating podcasting with the video world. That's a very big thing today. Some podcasters, they only record videos with their podcasts. You see both at the same time. So you hear them and you see them at the same time. I don't do that for every episode. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I do video creation, and I know that it is a major aspect for some people to have a visual representation of what they're listening to. I get that. For me, I do it for certain episodes, but I'm not going to do it for everybody's episode. The latest feature that Anchor added now is where you can add a video segment to a voice recorded segment. I haven't played around with that just yet. I'm going to come back with an update. If you've gotten this far, just subscribe. We'll wait. If you've gotten this far, thumbs it up. We'll wait. But I haven't played around with that just yet. So stay tuned for an update. I'm going to add, just to play around with some of the features that Anchor does offer. Why not? So my biggest thing is learning the interface and playing around with the editing, because that'll be your biggest thing, as well as your style. Is when are you uploading, and what are you uploading? How are you speaking? Who's your audience? What are you talking about? Things of that nature. And my biggest thing, be consistent. I upload podcast episodes every Monday. Every Monday. Rain, shine, sleet, hail, tornado, earthquake, you are getting a MUMU, Mutable and Multifaceted podcast episode, period. No excuses. It's a personal choice of mine. It's a business choice of mine. It's a creative choice of mine. It makes me feel better, and it establishes me as a credible podcast in the podcasting world. When you're not consistent, people can't keep up with you. People can't keep up with your content, and it does hinder your growth. But when you are constantly promoting your podcast, you're constantly dropping episodes, people know that you're the real deal. People know that you're a force to be reckoned with. So you have to be consistent. You have to keep it up. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm doing that now with YouTube. But with podcasting, honey, she own it. I don't play. I'm consistent every Monday. I did take off 1 month between my seasons. That's it, boo. So I love it. I love the aspect of making money without a basic or a minimal listenership. I love the aspect of making money as soon as you do your first podcast. You got the listeners, you getting people to listen to your sponsored segment, you're making money. And you're what? Where the money resides. Where the money resides. Where the money resides. And that's on who? Mary had a little lamb. Spotify had a little Anchor. Okay, like, get you some, honey. It's a big world, and I don't care if there's a million people doing the same exact thing that you're doing. They're not doing it like you. They're not doing it at your level, and you're not the same. So don't be afraid. Get started today. Download the Anchor app. It's very simple, very easy. Test it out. Try it out. And do you. I highly recommend you taking a bet on yourself and doing what you need to do. Like this video, thumbs it up, share it with somebody that could use it, and subscribe. Leave your podcast link down below, and I'll give you a listen, girl, or boy, or y'all, or they, or them, or us, or we. I'll give you a listen. I don't mind. I love it. I love connecting with other podcasters. I love sharing my version of life, because we all have a different version of life. We all are having a different experience, and a podcast is a great way to share and display that. So I love sharing my podcast with others. Share yours with me down below in the comments. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me at thankyoupercia@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions or concerns, or you just want to say, what's up, girl, leave it in the comments below. All right, y'all, have a great day. Bye, y'all. Welcome to MUMU, Mutable and Multifaceted by Percia Williams. Now let's get into today's episode.